Welcome to the Audiation in the Wild podcast with your hosts, Beau Taillefer and Eric Rasmussen. Season 2, Episode 5, Relatedness.
Okay, welcome everybody. As a warning to this episode, Eric has a sore throat, so you're going to be hearing a lot from me today.
My voice is sore.
His voice is sore. So in today's episode, we're going to be finishing off the self-determination theory triangle. And our interest in this is to help us learn about what's creating intrinsic motivation or interest in a subject. So this is really useful for music teachers, both as you as a teacher becoming more intrinsically motivated to teach music, and also from the point of view of you as a musician or your student's point of view, someone learning music becoming more intrinsically motivated to study music. So this wing that we're talking about here right now, for this part of the triangle, the relatedness part of the triangle, is really important. And I've mentioned this a few times on the podcast. My own musical upbringing, a high school band program was a big source of community in terms of my musical community. But really, there was this guitar program at the school, and I was a guitarist, and it just created this superstructure of motivation. You know, there were so many great guitar players at the school. The band director was, a great guy, great source of knowledge for guitar players. But really, it just created this sense of community where if you learned something, you could show it to somebody, or you could learn from other students. And looking back on my own musical upbringing in this environment, and putting it through the lens of this knowledge from self-determination theory, that increasing community relationships within a subject or hobby you're interested in tends to foster this sense of intrinsic motivation. I mean, it just totally lines up with my experience, and I think that's why a lot of people have success with different programs, whether it's the Suzuki program that fosters a bigger sense of community, or band programs, or joining bands. And I often think that's one of the big benefits of being at a university, is that a lot of people are driven enough to study music on their own. But when you're at a university studying music, this community thing starts to take over, and you can feel it.
Yeah, my experience is that when there's a band that I get to play with, and I know everybody, and I played with them for 10 years, It's like I can't stop thinking about the gig, for a couple weeks, or especially the day before, or, a few hours before. I'm like ready to rock and roll, and you put in a little extra practice, or you take care to warm up well, and you just like, it's not work at all. It's like we're going to a party, right? And you get paid hopefully more than $50, but you really get jazzed up, and so it's like, it's not the money, right? It's it's playing great music and hanging with your buddies. And you're going to laugh throughout the night. If it's, your typical situation that I'm in, bar or wedding or whatever it is, that we just get to play. And we're just background noise, but we enjoy ourselves. And if we're not background noise, it's all the better.
For sure. And I want to bring out something you said, the fact performing can actually qualify. So let's say you were a solo performer, you might get this sense of community from actually engaging with an audience. And I know, I think we told this story before, but I heard Gary Burton in a lecture say, even when he's at home practicing soloing, he has to picture someone listening to what he's doing, or it just doesn't feel right.
Yeah, if I have another teacher in the room observing me, my teaching goes up a notch, just like a little bit, because I just pay a little bit more. I have a heightened awareness of, exactly what I'm doing and when I'm doing it, and then pointing out the different things, throwing in a 2-second or 3-second comment, like, a particular kid.
Yeah. So I think this is important to talk about, because, people that are interested in music are often very intrinsically motivated and are able to practice on their own and carry out projects on their own. But you can develop this weird sense, and I think this happens to musicians and teachers even, where we start thinking, well, if someone's really into music, they don't need the community. They'll just do it all on their own. And I think looking at someone like Mozart is a great example. Clearly the guy, I mean, I didn't know Mozart, obviously, but clearly the guy was interested enough in music to practice. God knows how much he did.
I did know Mozart.
But we know Mozart, through his letters with his dad, got a high from making compositions that were going to be performed in public. And there's this letter Mozart writing to his dad where the idea of Mozart like putting the work in to write a symphony that wasn't going to be performed, it was ludicrous to him. He was like, well, why would I do that? You know, and it kind of highlights the point of this, the community aspect, or delivering your art form in a way that's digestible to another person or a teacher or a listener, being an essential part of the process of being a musician. So even for someone like this, who's very most likely intrinsically motivated, he still had this sense of participating with his musical creations in a public sphere. I mean, Mozart's an interesting example because his dad, you know, was a music teacher, and his older sister was a musician. So there's already that community aspect to his music learning right from ground zero. And I've seen this too, where, you know, my older brother was a piano player, and there was like a bit of friendly competition. You know, I'm 7 years younger than him. It was fun to like watch him play and try to copy him and be like, well, I can do what he's doing. You know, it was kind of, I got a little bit of a high off of that. But I think that's an important thing to think, is just, you know, just because one of your students or yourself might not feel turned on to practice in the the privacy of your own home, doesn't mean that you're not like an air quote authentic musician. You might actually need this community wiring more than someone else does. I mean, I'm sure there's a spectrum here. There's probably a bell curve in how much, you know, different people need this community ingredient to kind of get switched on. Some people like composing more in private. Some people like songwriting in a group.
Yeah, and I think it's really nice to have, you know, repertoire classes where, you know, it's not a concert, but you're playing for each other, and kids could benefit from that. I'm kind of socially awkward in that kind of situation, or in general, I can be socially awkward, except when I'm in front of a group of kids and somebody important is there to watch. Mm-hmm. You know, I had Bob Simon of 60 Minutes in my room.
I never knew that.
I showed off big time for the class that I had, because these kids were doing, they were doing, tonic dominant, major minor, and they were kindergarten. And I got in at the end of that. They were doing a special on the program that I was teaching for. My program that I was teaching for was a El Sistema inspired program in Baltimore. And so I was 5 years into that, and my kindergartners were the class I really wanted to show off. And at the end of the class, I just went back and shook his hand, and a couple other bigwigs that were there just said, "Hi, how was that?" And just kind of like, "Is that all right?" He says, Bob Simon says, "You're very good at what you do," in a raspy voice. And of course that night, I called my father, because my father was a huge 60 Minutes fan. It's like you could hear the beaming of him. But that aside, so that's inspirational. But if I'm in front of anybody, just another teacher or a parent who's sitting in on a class that doesn't usually sit in because they want to learn too, I go up a notch a little bit, and it's part of that community, but it's not always the case for me socially where I get my motivation from, because I really think I'm awkward, except socially awkward, except sometimes in my teaching. So I don't know if that kind of fits in the community a little bit. It's like I'm getting community feedback about, I get to show off, so that's motivational.
Well, I mean,
it's my thing.
Well, and self-determination theory, it shows why that would be the case. If you're in a community setting and you're performing some kind of skill or task that other people value, and you have mastery or competence over that, that's going to make you feel good. And I think sometimes people think, well, that's just boosting your ego. It's not like authentic enjoyment of teaching. And I just don't really buy that, because there's a healthy way to acknowledge, like, hey, I'm pretty good at this, and it feels good when I do it. And other people like when I do it. I mean, and all that together is kind of a nice thing. Obviously, that can be taken off the cliff and into chaos, where you think you're the hottest thing in town, and that can get unhealthy.
But then I wouldn't keep learning. See, that's the thing. I'm humble about the process, because every year it's the kids are different, and you've got to reconstruct what you've got to do all over again. It's different with each class, especially with the learning differences and the aptitude differences and the all the differences that the kids bring in. So you want to go in and be able to achieve the same amount or as much as you can with each child. So I don't, my ego can't be boosted anymore, so it doesn't matter if I boost my ego. With regard to my one little thing, no, I don't know. I love, and like when I'm playing with the band, have other people that you really enjoy, or have my boss come in and observe. I would love that.
Yeah, and part of this this relatedness. Part of this relatedness is being in a community or in relationships with people that are supportive in some way. And part of the support is autonomy support, ironically. So it's the other part of this triangle, is that when you're around people that support your autonomy, you can feel it. You can feel the difference. Like and there's a difference between someone saying, no, you have to do it. I'll give fingering for an example. So when I teach fingering, I'm very relaxed about, let's try all the fingering. You choose the one that you want, but I'm going to suggest that you try these all, and some of this stuff might be damn near impossible if you don't use the right fingering. But I now try to avoid a very top-down heavy, you have to do this. I'm more so, well, I highly encourage this, and let's try a bunch of different versions and see which one works. And maybe you should figure out why I'm saying you should use this fingering rather than just bowing down to it. And generally, people respond well to that, because you're encouraging someone to question. You're encouraging, don't just blindly follow it. If I tell you, even if I, as your music teacher, tell you to use a fingering and it doesn't make sense, like, I want to be challenged a bit on that. And you can feel there's a bit of autonomy support for that. Like, I'm not, it's not just an arbitrary, well, you have to follow this fingering because I'm a teacher and I know more than you. It's not necessarily true. I mean, a guitar is very specific in terms of some fingerings.
Even chord fingering? Is that what you're talking about mostly, or the pick fingers?
Yeah, because, like an example with chord fingering, certain guitar players will say, well, you have to use these fingers for these chords, but then in a more advanced piece, you basically will have to use the original, in air quote, incorrect fingering that the student wanted you to use, because another note needs to be added where another finger needs to be freed up. So I try to start a dialogue from day one that fingering is something you have to learn about, not something you just have to arbitrarily follow for no reason.
And then you show them a video of Django's left hand.
yeah.
Django,
I mean, that's often my response, is like, well, Django had two fully functioning fingers and two like half working fingers that he could sometimes use, but not really properly. And are you going to tell me that? I mean, that didn't work for him. So as a way around this, I try to say, well, let's try a bunch of different fingerings and practice different ones. And, some people would lose their mind about that, especially piano teachers. They would just explode if they heard something like that.
Yeah. Can't have fat lips and play trumpet, Louis Armstrong.
So in terms of practical, like a practical exercise you can actually do, because this is going to be the last part of the self-determination triangle that we're releasing. What can you do when, maybe you get an email from a parent, or you're talking to a parent and the parent's like, my kid seems good at music, but I want them to practice more. I mean, the question is, it's not take out a checklist sheet and say, well, we just practice for 20 minutes a day and you put a check there and we'll track it. And that can help for some people, but that's probably actually going to decrease their intrinsic motivation. So this self-determination theory problem solving, it's not as direct as you might want it to be, but asking these questions or thinking about this for your students. Well, does my student have a musical community other than me? Do they just come for lessons with me and that's it? Because if that's the case, it very well might be one of the reasons why they're not intrinsically motivated. It's not valuable to them.
Yeah. if they're
And they
into
might,
it, maybe, there's a couple things I'm thinking of, like have the neighbors come over and watch you practice. If they might, or have your son and daughter play together for a little bit once a month.
that's a great example of group interaction with other musicians can often just cause a surge in interest in practicing because they see a point. Well, we got to play this concert, and I like playing with my friends, and it'd be nice if I could play the music well. So practice seems like it makes more sense.
What's also really good when it's really that informal is to give the performer a chance to fail a bunch of times and keep going. So that when it really counts, when they do, I fail. I mean, they drop a line or they drop a couple notes and they want to start over, or whatever. That they know how to persevere and just keep going. There's some benefit to more informal community kind of, and when you do that at a recital, they always get the loudest applause. It's like,
and you're going to have to investigate the temperament of your students. I mean, some students are going to be more prone to performing. They're going to like that pressure, that environment, that feedback. Some of them might need more informal performance opportunities before it turns into like, full-blown recital with a mini tuxedo on.
My first recital, I was not going to bow. I told my teacher, I'm not going to bow. Just leaving us on of 7.
Did you bow?
I walked off and bowed, while walking. Probably.
Something that I've done with students in the past with recitals that are nervous about performing, I just perform with them for the first few recitals they do. I mean, why not? It doesn't have to be all the pressure on, one student, like looking at like 80 people.
Yeah, well,
that can be very intimidating.
The typical, community engagement is, playing a recital or playing a performance and then accepting the accolades from everybody that comes, but it can be really embarrassing and hard to deal with. At least I was that way when I was young. So my dad really wanted me to play for his 3 chemistry, compatriots at work. And I had worked on Black Orpheus, and I learned it off of the Doc Severinsen album, which is so cheesy 60s. It's funny, but he had a beautiful sound, and I don't think I learned the second phrase properly. I never got the second A right, but anyway, I played that, and boy, I just wanted to go back to my bedroom and hide for the rest of the night, even though, I probably did okay. And I don't know if it got contextual. It's like I learned this off of the thing, but I think about it now, and it's like, why didn't I do more of that? We're kind of getting off topic about that, but the embarrassment
my mind, that seems quite on topic for me. You get some kind of feedback from, like, some kind of emotional internal signal when you show someone something you've been working on, and that can be very valuable, even if it's just like your dad's friends or whatever.
Yeah, well, forced, all these PhDs and MDs and PhD MDs and anyway, the world of chemistry.
So for your students, that can be useful to just take inventory of and maybe talk to their parents or talk to the students about like who your friends that play music, try to find, because often finding ways to increase the community involvement is better spent minute per minute on your end rather than trying to teach them new practice techniques or ways of scheduling things, or it'll just produce a stronger stronger force of intrinsic motivation.
Every person that's playing an instrument should play with another couple people fairly regularly. There should be a small ensemble. It's just trio, quartet, duet, whatever, because those are the best. They're the more difficult, context to play in sometimes, but it's undervalued. It's so much more important to be able to do that than play solo or to hide in an orchestra or a band or something larger.
The same thing goes for composers. I mean, there are so many classical composers I can think of, like Sergio Assad, who he will compose, and he's obviously an amazing guitarist himself, but he'll often compose pieces for another guitar player to play. And, you start questioning, well, why didn't you just do it all yourself. He clearly could have done it. He has the talent to do it, but he's going to get this sense of involvement instead of him. I was listening to David Russell play music that was composed by Sergio Assad for him, and they get a sense of partnership in a project, but they both carry a significant load of the work. So I mean that's just a great place to start. But I'd also like to just zoom out a little bit and say that this also applies to being a teacher. And we've talked about this on the podcast, but this is one of the reasons Eric and I like doing the podcast is that, I mean, one of us could have this podcast on our own, but I don't think it would be, near as fun. And so all these psychological. I mean, Eric, we were talking. I have quite a mouth on me, so I mean, I probably could fill the airtime, but I still don't think it would be as fun. So, I mean, you can also look at your own involvement in teaching. How intrinsically motivated are you at teaching? And instead of thinking of it like a soulmate equation, while I'm either passionate about teaching or I'm not passionate about teaching, it's either a soulmate career for me or a non-soulmate kind of match for me. You can actually start thinking, well, are there things I can do that would increase my interest in this? And things like going to conferences, becoming part of a musical community, even like something like volunteering. There's a jazz festival for the high school kids around here that's always in February, and volunteering always just kind of seems nice. You get this nice feeling of helping, but under this lens, it's like, wow, volunteering could really benefit you as a musician, just helping out and being around other people that are interested in something. It's good for you, it's good for them.
I have a friend that has a pretty high up position in the New Jersey Arts Center, and he posted a picture just yesterday, and it's unbelievable. It's Max Roach, and he's just hanging out with him. And there's some other, and just name anybody, and he's been around them. Or if they've played there, he's the guy that kind of walks them around and hangs with them. And he's a great bass player. I mean, very good. Nobody would know him, but we went to college together. But he posts these pictures, and he just, boy, what a wonderful, perfect job for him, just to hang out with these phenomenal, the state-of-the-art musicians, Class A musicians, and it goes from every style, every genre. It's really awesome. But you just see the smiles on his face every time he does. So what a tremendous community there. That's off the scale. But for teachers, the community could just be your students. You got your handful of special kids that just are, that either like you, and sometimes too much, like they want to cling, in my case, or you've got, a handful of kids who just are the perfect student. They come in, they sit down, and they learn quickly, and anything you do, and they laugh at all your jokes and like that. So that's some feedback too. That the community could include everybody.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it does. I think students and parents are a big part of that, and once in a while I get emails from parents.
Oh yeah,
saying they get whatever out of the lessons musically or just on a personal level, and that's pretty nice.
Or you get helicopter parents, which is kind of the opposite. They're always. Oops.
I think I weed helicopter parents out just because. I think they naturally get weeded out because the helicopter parents, there seems like a high correlation between helicopter parents and parents that want their children to read sheet music from day one.
Oh, okay.
So like we
need a helicopter parent aptitude measure.
Yeah, they'll often want to be very detailed and structured about how the lessons are unfolding, and I'm very open to that level of structure. It just doesn't unfold in terms of sheet music on their timeline.
Yeah, but even with that, maybe you get the silver lining is that you appreciate your other parents more, or that you hone your skills to communicate, because that's difficult for a lot of teachers who teach one-on-one. When there's something that you really need to address that's happening either at home or in the lesson, where the parents are cross-wiring what you're trying to do.
One thing I noticed at the studio that I used to work at, because I teach privately now, is a lot of my peers didn't talk to the parents of the students that they taught. And that always seemed very odd to me. I would always take the last minute or 2 minutes of the lesson and, bring the parent in the room or go talk to the parent and just check in with them and saying, get to know them. And I think that's a really good idea on a lot of levels. And, they'll feel more included in the process, because often they don't feel included in the process because maybe they don't play an instrument and they don't know how to help the kids practice, but just giving them, a few minute here or there, just telling them how it's going. I think that's a great idea.
There's the gamut of stuff to consider, and all of it will contribute to whether you really like what you're doing or don't. And then, of course, the other two legs of the stool, competency and autonomy.
Mm-hmm. So as a final wrap up of these three psychological nutriments, I mean, in terms of my history, my mom and parents and family and all that kind of stuff were very supportive of me playing music, and I showed them stuff. They never asked that I practice ever, which I'm not saying is a good strategy to have if you're a parent or a teacher. But my mom, like, I could literally call her right now and be like, "Mom, I'm quitting guitar forever, and I'm going to become a unicorn breeder," and she would be like, "That's great, honey." So it's like my mom is just like, the autonomy is just like so open, it's absurd. And then the sense of mastery, and that one I think is a little more difficult for parents to meddle with, because like you said, Eric, you want to put students into situations where or yourself, where you do deal with real failure in life from time to time, and you learn the skills to handle that. But in terms of learning, music learning is a long process, and not every moment it needs to be that high stakes. And it's just like a video game. You go through a level, you defeat all the easy the zombies come at you and they're easy to kill, and then at the end there's a dragon that you have to battle, and that might be a little harder, and then the whole process starts over. Bunch of easier stuff, maybe it's a little harder than it was before, and there's a dragon at the end of the level. And I like that analogy, because it's not all dragons all the time, and it's not all easy. There's a variance in how the challenges that you go through, but the sense of mastery, I think, is really accounted for musically in what Gordon was talking about, and what MLT, even stands for. This community stands for.
Yeah, in my earlier doctoral studies, Load Runner, the first version. Oh my God, I got hooked on that.
Oh yeah.
Now we're going sideways, but it was the best. Oh my God, and that last level was insane.
What's remarkable about video games, they can have no community element, which they often do now because video games are all on the internet. But video games can be as solitary and very intrinsically motivated, literally just because the mastery component is so well sequenced. You essentially get there's a fine line between intrinsic motivation and just straight up addiction here, because the intrinsic motivation is so powerful. But there's a lesson you can glean from that.
Yeah, my brain was burnt out, ate dinner, and I would just play for hour and a half or 2 hours or whatever. And, oh my God, it was so fun. And now we're drifting back into
well, I mean, or if you get into these open world fantasy games, World of Warcraft and all these games, I don't know, I don't play these games, but there's super autonomy. You can do whatever you want. You can walk around and do whatever you want. It's all community based. It's all online. You're chatting to people and interacting with people.
Oh, sure.
And you gain some kind of skills in the game, and so when you look at those video games under the self-determination theory lens, it's like, no wonder people like play.
Oh yeah, no, it's perfect. Yeah, it's perfect for that. So just apply that framework onto your teaching, or it's missing in the video game that you want to add to your teaching.
Another very simple one is just let your kids or students just play multiple instruments. Why not? I get a lot of people want their students to play piano for whatever reason. People just laser beamed in on piano. But why not play multiple instruments? There's really, I think, only upside to that.
Yep.
So, I mean, I'm assuming we'll come back to this at some point, because I think it's such a useful topic to be reminded of once a year, or who knows. But
it helps open some awareness of yourself and your relationship to those three posts, and whether I'll be honest, it's like most mornings, or many mornings, not most, but many mornings, it's just like just go through the motions of getting breakfast, shower, shave, whatever. And, you go in like, oh, whatever. And then once the kids walk in the room, it's like a light switches on. It's like you just become present to the little ones, or present to your students. And then, it's like, boy, I get to play. And you think about what you've accomplished in the last month or two, because I'm not worried about last lesson so much. Although I string more together better because of Engelman, how I'm doing that. So I do know, but what I'm saying is basically that, boy, it just feels good to be teaching when I'm teaching.
I think that's why a lot of students like taking music lessons. There's so much stuff for free online. Like half of my guitar students, you could learn everything from just watching YouTube videos, but they kind of want someone to hang out with. And part of that role is to literally give them knowledge and correct things and say, maybe you should not do that and try this instead. Well, I think a lot of it is just the fact that they want to hang out with someone, and they have a need for that. And this actually, in a funny segue, it makes me much more confident in the security of our jobs, because people are like, AI is gonna outperform music teachers and like there's gonna be no need for lessons. No way. People have a need for human interaction, and that's a large part of your job. And it doesn't mean you have to put on a show for kids. I mean, you kind of just or any student, you're hanging out with them and helping them learn. You have a role as a teacher. But yeah, I mean, this is not going to go away just if Google somehow develops a great way to teach, harmonic patterns or tonal patterns or anything like that. It's still not going to eliminate the need for human interaction. So.
No, it's tremendous advantage to have a community for anything, and specifically music teachers. I think we've hit the top few. All right, I need some tea.
All right, well, until next time.
All right, thanks.